Between 2016 and 2021, in the coastal region of Kenya, a disturbing pattern was emerging. A pattern that would expose fatal cracks in the Kenyan justice system and cost innocent lives. Today's story is one of a vicious killer who was once sentenced to death, then released after serving just 1 year, and then went on to kill again. Welcome back to the Crime Gist. My name is Damisa. May 3rd, 2021, in Marina area of Mtwapa Township in Kilifi County, the night guard at Jacqueline Gina Kiveka's residence watched her leave the compound at around 8 p.m. 90 minutes later, at 9:30 p.m., he saw her return home. It was an unremarkable evening. He had no idea that he would be one of the last people to see Jacqueline Gina alive. Gina was building a life that most people would only dream of. She was a businesswoman in her early 30s, and she ran a swimwear shop at Pirates Beach in Mtwapa, catering to both tourists and locals. But her success went beyond just business. She had found love with a British man named Harry Harrington, who shared her vision for the future. Together, they had opened their hearts to 3 of Gina's young relatives, sponsoring their education and giving them opportunities they might never have had otherwise. And for Gina and Harry Harrington, wedding plans were in motion. They were more than ready to start the next chapter of their life. But someone somewhere had other plans. May 4th, 2021, one of Gina's friends, wanting to catch up with her, called her phone that day. It rang a couple of times but went unanswered. Instead, a text message came through. "We'll call you back." But Gina never called her back. For anyone who knew Jacqueline Gina, she wasn't the type to ignore calls or leave her friends hanging. Her best friend and former roommate, who was now living in Switzerland, also tried to get a hold of Gina that day but couldn't. When she hadn't heard back from her by the following day, the unease began to settle in. She decided to send her little sister, who wasn't living far from Gina, to go and check on her. On May 6th, 2021, at around 4 p.m., the young lady, accompanied by another one of Gina's friends, went to her home. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Finally, with the help of the security guard, they gained access to Gina's 2-bedroom home. They went from room to room looking for her. When they got to one of the bedrooms, they opened the wardrobe, and they were not really prepared for what they saw. The scene they encountered was like something straight from a horror movie. Inside, they found Gina's body. She had been stuffed in the wardrobe in a grotesque position, her head forced downwards towards the floor, and her legs facing upwards in that confined space. But the killer hadn't just taken Gina's life. He had ransacked her home, making off with electronics, household appliances, her mobile phone, and other items that would soon become crucial evidence. The police had a theory: find the stolen items, find the killer. But first, they had to inform the family. Jacqueline Gina's sister and cousin made that agonizing journey from Tala to Mombasa to identify her body, a trip no family should ever have to make. On May 10th, Gina's body was taken to Coast General Hospital for a postmortem examination. The results were puzzling. No external injuries were found. The cause of death could also not be ascertained from the autopsy alone, though she appeared to have been strangled. And on May 19th, the toxicology results came back negative. There were no toxic substances detected in her body. The medical examiner couldn't tell them for sure how Gina died, but the police knew one thing for certain. This was murder. Someone had killed her, hidden her body, and stolen her possessions. Now it was a race to find out who. Meanwhile, investigators were waiting on crucial information from Kenya's largest mobile network operator, that is Safaricom. As we know, in modern times, call data records can be the difference between a cold case and a conviction. On May 21st, 2021, the call data records arrived, and with this, the investigation cracked wide open. The records showed that the last person to call Gina's phone was a man named Brown Kipande. But Brown Kipande wasn't just calling Gina that day. His own call records revealed that he had recently been in constant contact with a local Shylock. Shylocks provide quick cash loans, often using personal items as collateral. It's a system built on trust, or at least on the value of whatever you are willing to leave behind. The police put the pieces together: stolen items, a money lender, and a suspect who was likely in need of quick cash. So they made a call to this Shylock named Hamisi Mohammed and arranged to meet with him in Mtwapa. When the police arrived at Hamisi's shop, accompanied by some of Gina's family and friends, the identification was immediate and heartbreaking. There, among the collateral items, were Gina's belongings: a blender, an iron box, a juice mixer, a toaster, and other mundane treasures of domestic life. And now, they were evidence in a murder investigation. The police immediately handcuffed Hamisi. Under arrest, Hamisi gave up the customer who had brought in these items. He told investigators that he knew the man as Brown Kipande. Brown Kipande had come to him on May 5th, that is the day before Gina's body was discovered, depositing the blender, toaster, and juice mixer for a total of 1,550 Kenyan shillings. Kipande claimed that he needed the money to take his wife to the hospital. 4 days later, on May 9th, Brown Kipande had returned with an iron box, receiving another 2,050 shillings. Hamisi said that he had been completely unaware of the item's origin or Brown Kipande's real identity. He was simply trying to run his business, and he was ready to fully cooperate with the police. Upon further inquiry, it would emerge that the man known as Brown Kipande was actually officially known as Robert Waliaula Kinisu. He was just using Brown Kipande as an alias. He was an electrician, plumber, and handyman who repaired phones, TVs, and radios, and also did fittings around Mtwapa area. He had registered a SIM card under the false name of Brown Kipande and was using this SIM card to do some illegal acts. Brown Kipande was the same name identified as having called Gina's phone the day she had last been seen alive. Police tried calling this number, but there was no answer. So they decided to call someone close to him instead. They had better luck reaching his wife, known as Scholastica Magoha. When they got a hold of her, they asked her to come down to the station the following day, that is May 22nd. However, she hesitated. She insisted that she couldn't make it then, but would come on the 23rd instead. That one-day delay was very significant. Scholastica needed time to talk to her husband, and time to figure out what was happening. That day when she received the call from the police, Robert was away in Bamburi doing some plumbing work. But when he returned home on May 22nd, Scholastica told him about the police calls. And Robert knew exactly what this meant. The walls were closing in on him and his time was running out. May 23rd, 2021 at 8:30 a.m., Robert Waliaula Kinisu walked into a local resort known as Mayor Lodge, carrying a traveling bag. He checked it with the establishment, then left. Whatever was in that bag, he didn't want it found at his home when the police came calling. 30 minutes later, at 9 a.m., Scholastica Magoha walked into the police station as she had promised, and what she told investigators would seal her husband's fate. Yes, Robert had brought home items on May 4th, a day after Gina was last seen alive, including an iron box, a blender, and other household goods. And just that morning, when he learned that his wife was going to speak to the police, he had packed a bag and removed it from their house. She also confirmed Robert's phone numbers, one registered under his name and another under Brown Kipande. Police immediately began tracking him, and fortunately, they didn't have to look far. Robert Waliaula Kinisu was arrested not far from the police station. He had been waiting nearby, perhaps for his wife or perhaps preparing to run. Police escorted him to Mayor Lodge, where they retrieved the brown traveling bag, which was later found to belong to Gina and which also contained some of Gina's stolen items. Then they went to his home, where they recovered even more stolen property. The evidence was overwhelming. May 24, 2021, Robert Waliaula Kinisu stood before Mombasa High Court, charged with murder contrary to Section 203 and 204 of the Kenyan Penal Code. He then applied for bail. The prosecution opposed it, and for good reason. As the case unfolded, a very chilling history came to light, one that would horrify the public and raise very serious questions about Kenya's justice system. It was discovered that this wasn't Robert Kinisu's first murder charge. It wasn't the first time being accused of killing a woman in her own home and stealing her household items. The parallels were so striking, they seemed impossible to dismiss as coincidence. On June 7, 2016, a Mombasa-based model named Janet Adhiambo Asuna was found bludgeoned to death in her mother's upmarket Kizingo estate home. Robert Waliaula Kinisu was charged with robbing her of a cell phone, sandwich toaster, iron box, and a mobile charger. The charge alleged that, during the robbery, he used personal violence and killed her. Postmortem results confirmed that Janet had been beaten to death. In the days after she was murdered, using his own ID card, Kinisu had withdrawn 26,600 shillings from Janet's M-Pesa accounts at different outlets in 3 separate transactions. When confronted with this evidence in court, Robert Kinisu had an alibi. He claimed that he had been in his upcountry home attending his aunt's burial in Bungoma during the time of the murder. He even produced a return bus ticket to prove it. But the dates on his travel tickets, the date he claimed to be in Bungoma, were the exact same dates when withdrawals were being made from the deceased phone using his ID card in Mombasa. The evidence against him in this case was very substantial. He was found guilty in 2018 and sentenced to death. Justice appeared to have been served. Then came 2019. After appealing the death sentence, the higher court overturned Kinisu's conviction and acquitted him. After serving just 1 year of imprisonment, Robert Waliaula Kinisu walked free. The reasons given for this acquittal involved some procedural and evidential issues, technicalities that, in the eyes of the law, outweighed the circumstantial evidence against him. Public dismay was immediate, but the system had spoken. A man sentenced to death for murder was now back on the street. 2 years later, Jacqueline Gina Kidheka would be dead, her body stuffed in her wardrobe, her household items pawned for little cash. When Robert Kinisu's case for Gina's murder came to trial, the prosecution faced significant challenges. This was largely a circumstantial case. No one had witnessed the murder. The night watchman didn't know Robert and couldn't place him at the scene. Robert Kinisu also claimed he didn't know Gina, and no one could definitively prove otherwise. Also, the cause of Gina's death remained medically undetermined. But circumstantial evidence can also be powerful when circumstances paint a clear picture. The prosecution presented the following. One was call records showing that Robert was the last person to contact Gina. Second was the stolen items from Gina's home found in Robert's possession and for which Robert had no plausible explanation as to how he came into possession of them. Third was his wife's testimony that he had brought these items home on May 3rd, the day after Gina was last seen alive. Fourth was his suspicious behavior, like using a false name and also moving evidence to a hotel when he learned that the police were investigating him. Last but not least was his previous conviction for an almost identical crime, murdering a woman in her home and stealing household appliances. The legal concept of inferred guilt came into play. While no single piece of evidence definitively proved Kinisu killed Gina, the totality of circumstances pointed to one inescapable conclusion. October 28, 2021 provided a preview of what was to come. The judge in the High Court of Mombasa refused to grant Kinisu bail, noting the risk he posed to the community and the possibility of witness interference. The prosecution had accused him of attempting to dissuade a witness from attending investigations. This was a serious allegation that spoke to his consciousness of guilt. The court also considered his history. This pattern weighed heavily in the decision to keep him in custody throughout the trial. October 22, 2025, after years of legal proceedings, the guilty verdict was delivered. Robert Waliaula Kinisu was convicted of murdering Jacqueline Gina Kitheka. Sentencing day arrived on 19 February 2026. Given Robert Kinisu's history and the nature of the crime, many expected the death penalty. Instead, the court handed down a life sentence, ensuring that this time, Robert Waliaula Kinisu would not walk free after serving just 1 year. Gina's family and friends, including her partner Harry, sat in the courtroom when the verdict was read out. Friends and family of his first victim, Janet Asuna, were also in the courtroom. They all welcomed this life sentence verdict. Today, Robert Waliaula Kinisu sits in prison, his name synonymous with violent crime and legal controversy along the Kenyan coastal region. This case sparked nationwide debate about judicial reforms and the delicate balance the justice system must strike between protecting the rights of the accused and protecting society from dangerous individuals. It leaves us with some very haunting questions. How many lives could have been saved if the 2019 acquittal had gone differently? Did Janet Adhiambo Asuna die in vain? Did Gina's murder have to happen? If the justice system had just held the first time, would Gina still be alive? All we know is that justice failed that first time, and Jacqueline Gina Kitheka paid the ultimate price. That brings us to the end of today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this episode with other true crime junkies like yourself. See you right here on the next one.